First of all, thank you all for staying. I know that you all want to have coffee and you want that fast, but we still have a panel and it's a bit intimidating, I guess, as I'm an author and a podcaster. If you want, you can come downstairs during the coffee break, check out my magazine, and maybe subscribe to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. If you don't, that's fine. But I have two other podcasters and authors who are going to join this panel, and I also have a royalty from, there you are. We have the Prince of Serbia who's going to join this panel, and he is the newest addition to Jan3, which is Samson Mao's company. And what else is there to mention? We also have Daniel. You're here, Daniel. He's an author from Argentina and a big Bitcoin advocate. And I need to also sit down. So the topic of this panel is, let me read it out loud. So it's not about developing markets, it's about emerging markets. And I was a bit puzzled by the terminology, because if we think in the context of Bitcoin, every market is an emerging market. And based on our experience, we are kind of stuck in an echo chamber here. We see some of the same people attend the conferences, and we see familiar faces. So from this point of view, every market is an emerging market. But at the same time, we do have experiences as authors and content creators with various markets and people with whom we interact. Most of us translated content in our languages and provided education to the people around us. So we're gonna go around from left to right and talk about, first of all, we get to introduce ourselves, and maybe we should define what is an emerging market in this context so that we can narrow down the scope of our debate. You go first, Obi.
Left to right. It's way too early to have mathematics like that. So my name's Obi. I'm one of the co-founders of Fedi, which is powered by Fedimint, and also I'm a board member for B Trust, which is a not-for-profit that was set up by a generous donation from Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z. And an emerging market, I would classify it as a market with the most opportunity for the Bitcoin space. These are the people who are going from 0 or 1 and trying to get to 2 to 3. They're the people who have the most growth in terms of population, but the least level of assets and from a global perspective.
Yeah, hi, my name is Anita Posch, and I'm a Bitcoin podcaster. I wrote a book for beginners about Bitcoin, which is called Learn Bitcoin. And I'm the founder of Bitcoin for Fairness. And I'm going to the countries, some of the emerging countries in the global south, where I agree with Obi, think that people need Bitcoin the most because of their life circumstances and the hardness and difficulty of their lives and their financial oppression that they're living under. And that's the last thing I wanted to say. Exactly about the definition of emerging countries for me. Actually, to be honest, it's just using another word than developing or third world, because these are like words that say you're third class or you're developing, you're not as good as we are, and that's why I say emerging markets.
Yeah, I'm agree with that. I like to call it undeveloped markets, because I think it's a proper term. Well, I'm Danny. I'm coming from Argentina. I'm trying to educate about Bitcoin since 2013, that I first knew about Bitcoin. Well, I try to talk about the reality of this market, especially in Argentina, but I also on all the region.
Hi, everyone. My name is Filip, or Prince Filip. I've just joined Jan3, but I'm still working in the legacy financial world. I'm transitioning out very, very soon. I see emerging markets as well. In the legacy financial and asset management, they classify, this is according to the MSCI index, which is the industry standard indices, where they classify emerging markets. They have developed markets, which is the developed world, which most of us can know what that is, but then emerging markets, and then there's frontier markets below that. But again, I don't like that classification of frontier market. In my opinion, anything below developed market is emerging market or developing market. So, yeah.
Right, so now that we define what an emergent market is, we are still stuck in the same room with the same people who might already know the stuff about Bitcoin and its benefits. So my next question to you is, to all of you, is how can we actually help these emerging markets? What is the kind of involvement that makes a difference? And I know that each one of you, to some extent, have been to a different country and have helped to spread the word of Bitcoin. But how, more specifically?
Well, may I start with this? First of all, in these emerging markets, especially in Argentina, we still have a lot of problems far beyond people understanding Bitcoin. We have a huge amount of people that don't even have access to clean water or electricity or some basics. So I always say that we have to start trying to find a way to address that problems before we can teach people how to use Bitcoin or any other digital currency, if you want. Other thing that we may start with, especially in Argentina, I don't know about other countries, but in Argentina, people are very used to save value on dollars, US dollars, because our Argentinian pesos is always devaluating day by day. So maybe we have to build a bridge to get to Bitcoin, but starting with some stable coins. We Bitcoiners don't like stablecoin very much, but I think we have to build that bridge because people are so familiar with US dollar that buying, for example, USDT or USDC is something that they feel more familiar. When you talk directly about Bitcoin, they just get a little bit scared because of volatility and all of this stuff. So maybe we have to make that bridge, teach people how to hold maybe some stable coins. We have a lot of them, and there are some better than others. And then when they were able to save money in stablecoin, at least for 2 months, whatever, the spare money that they have, they can then store it in Bitcoin for the long run. But I think it's important to teach people how to use stable coins before jumping to Bitcoin, at least in the emerging markets.
That's interesting. I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's important to know about stablecoins. Yes, that's right. But I think my work is to go there and to share my knowledge on the level, on the ground, with the people, to talk about what is Bitcoin and how the properties of Bitcoin help them to get more freedom and a chance. Also, I think the emphasis should be on earning Bitcoin. So these people don't have money to use it as a store of value like we do here, like Bitcoin is digital gold. Yeah, they need to be able to save or earn like $1 a month or $10 via Bitcoin and be able to save these $2 a month. That's now possible through the Lightning Network, which is great. And I think when they've got those basic knowledge about Bitcoin, yes, of course, they can or should maybe use stable coins, but then hopefully on Bitcoin, and we will see that soon. And so I agree from that standpoint, and I also say to them, you know, if you use Lightning, it's like your daily spendings, and if you can afford to save something, you could do it on-chain, but then you need to think like in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years' time. And so what I'm doing basically is I'm going there, I'm trying to find people. I do Bitcoin talks for beginners, and then people come, like there was one guy who drove 6 hours by bus to come to my talk to Zimbabwe, and he said, I think I'm the only Bitcoin maximalist in Bulawayo, But then we found 3 or 4 other guys, and he started a meetup in Harare and in Bulawayo, which is Bitcoin only, because the most important thing is really to go there and to build trust, showing your face. Because the people have such a big distrust of Bitcoin because all think it's a scam, because everybody has been scammed. They don't know it's a technology that you can't join. And so I think it's the most important thing to build this trust. And they also, to be honest, Alakanali Itireleng said one time to me, she said, you know, it's also a white technology and we don't trust that.
I was just referring to, we have a huge amount of people that cannot save a single dollar amount, you know. And that's the big problem.
Yes, but I'm not sure how Bitcoin can solve that.
No. Bitcoin cannot solve that. But maybe if someone buys Bitcoin for the first time and then he received the bear market, well, it's, you know, what happened in general. So there's a lot of people that cannot afford volatility on Bitcoin because they don't have enough money to buy food for the next week. So maybe if the little money they received, they can first convert it to a stablecoin. I mean, any one of them. And then if they finally have some saving in that stablecoin, then they can jump to Bitcoin. That's what I think. Because it's impossible for a lot of people in our countries to save in the long term. You know what I mean?
I know, but I think it should be up to them if they save in Bitcoin or in stablecoin.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I agree with you in general.
I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, but I know also my people and the problems that they have on the ground. So I know actually that many people are now in Argentina at least saving in stablecoins without even know what Bitcoin is. So our mission is to bring that knowledge and teach people. Once they understood that they can save money using a stablecoin, it's much easier to explain what Bitcoin is because they have some experience on a digital currency. So when I explain Bitcoin to someone that already have any stablecoin, it understands what I mean more easily. So that's why I say that we should maybe build this bridge before going directly to Bitcoin, because there's a lot of people that cannot afford a bear market. You know, they live day by day. That's the big problem.
I mean, so I see both sides of this argument. So having my family coming from Nigeria, and having talked to some of the most prolific activists, human rights defenders from around the world, a recurring message, and 6 months ago I would have been 100%, we've just got to jump straight to Bitcoin, but a recurring message that we heard again and again is that for many people on the ground, they are very scared about the downward volatility of their local currency. But for them, compared to everything else, they just know the US dollar. And so for some people, you have to meet them where they are and then take them on a journey towards Bitcoin. But there are other places. I was talking to Fadiel Selamin, who was speaking at Bitcoin, Miami, I believe, earlier this year. He, in parts of the Middle East, and Roya Mahbub as well, talks about the Middle East. There, for them, it's Bitcoin. Everyone in the Middle East wants Bitcoin. They don't want USD. So it depends on the region of the global south. Some people are ready for Bitcoin, some people are not, and they need to be transitioned. But even if they're not ready for Bitcoin itself as the asset, they still would want their USD protected by the most powerful network out there. And you can use systems like Liquid Tether, for example, and potentially others in future that are still powered by the Bitcoin network, protected by the Bitcoin network, but giving you a transition path that in future we could have discrete log contracts for difference, which are actually just for one person who believes in the future value of Bitcoin, they can take one side of that contract, and the other person who just wants USD and doesn't want their local currency, like the Venezuelan Bolivar has 20,000% inflation, and that's come down from 40,000% inflation. You know, for them, they could at least transition from that to USD, but actually are still holding a contract that's in Bitcoin. So there are many ways which we can power this revolution by Bitcoin, even if the user is starting with USD and we slowly transition them. That being the case, the ultimate destination must and will always be Bitcoin. And this is where the real opportunity is to come back to the original question, in the global south, or as Kingsway Capital says, the global poor, different ways to just call a spade as opposed to trying to marketect the name, the most disadvantaged parts of the world. But we have to understand that they have the highest opportunity. You have people, billions of people who are hungry to work and to provide value to the rest of the world. And we now have, for the first time, an opportunity for all of that human capital to be deployed towards the benefit of the world. There are probably, it's unlikely there's only one Elon Musk worldwide, one Einstein, there's probably dozens of them. And the world is missing out by not being able to locate them. Now there's many parts of the puzzle, but one is the way we hold and transfer value. And for the first time, we've created a meritocratic money that anyone who's willing to work hard can access. And we have systems of communication, satellite systems. You know, there's the Blockstream satellite, there's many others where basically we can access this network anywhere in the world. And so we actually have this amazing opportunity for the first time where the global south, by empowering them through Bitcoin, can help the world. So that's why a year ago I sold my company. It was a Western Bitcoin exchange. It was called CoinFloor. It was the UK's longest running Bitcoin exchange. And sold it, did well, but I decided to do 4 things. And these were all Bitcoin, all empowering the global south, all with global impact all the time. And that's what everybody should be trying to focus on, because these are the fastest growing markets for Bitcoin, the most active markets for Bitcoin. And even when they're using stable coins, the potential is for that to run on Bitcoin as well. So it's all potential. We should all be focusing on it. This is where the revolution will happen.
I couldn't agree more. Also, another area I would like to talk about is regulations. I mean, it's kind of boring, but it's necessary. In Serbia, where I'm from, it's classified according to MSCI frontier market. I don't like that. So I guess it's developing, emerging. But anyway, last year they introduced first ever cryptocurrency regulations. I hate the word crypto, but you know, and not good at all. Capital gains tax, and it's not good for new entries into the space to get the licensing. Absolute nightmare, and for existing players as well to get the licenses again. They have to jump through so many hoops. It's a nightmare. So I think they have to go back to the drawing board. You know, they have to start open discussions with the regulators and regulatees, and with industry experts, and come to an agreement. This might take time, but over time, with that sort of time, you will help the innovation. But I think education is key over here, and I think we have to make sure that there's no altcoinery, shitcoinery, if you know what I mean. And we focus more on Bitcoin and talk about the things that really matter, and that is no capital gains tax, nothing about stopping people from running, holding their own private keys and running their own nodes. And yeah, I think those are really important. I think it's something that's going to experience in a lot of the emerging markets when they find out, when they have to regulate this, that you can't stop the innovation. And Serbia has had a really big brain drain problem over the years. And with the recent cryptocurrency laws, that no one wants to come back to Serbia to work on that. So I'll do my best to try and change that, and hopefully we can use examples from other parts of the world, and we can work together for this.
I think all of you presented very interesting cases. And Anita, you mentioned the Lightning Network. Obi, you mentioned Liquid Tether, so the Liquid sidechain. And you also mentioned, Daniel, something about stablecoins, which I think are coming to the Lightning Network. And this is a very important question about which layer we use to onboard the newbies. Obviously, we cannot use the base layer. It will not scale. If we use the base layer, it's going to have costs that may be prohibitive to the newcomers. So we want to use something that is both secure, easy to use, and affordable. And in your experience, what is it that you use? I know that you're working on a Chaumian Mint system, and the Lightning Network cannot onboard every person in the world if they want to open a channel, so there are some scalability issues there. So I'm not going to foreshadow your answers. Let's go and try to answer this dilemma.
So about 2 years ago, it was around the time that 2.5 years ago now, the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, ratified a recommendation called, and it included the travel rule. And we now talk about that a lot. And the Financial Action Task Force is an unelected body, but they make these recommendations. But throughout the history of the FATF, every recommendation they've made has been 100% implemented over the next 3 to 6 years. And we're now at 3 years after that, and you're going to start to see that being implemented. It was at that point I started to think that if we extrapolate, we're all low time preference people, so we should really extrapolate. At some point, with billions of people online, the current future is a few sovereign individuals, when you have billions online, will be self-custodying. And let's say the best will in the world, 5, 10, 20%, let's say. But that means 80% won't be, for one of 3 reasons. One is it's going to be too costly for them. Billions of people will be excluded because of that, for whatever reason. $100, if you've only got to spend on a hardware wallet, if you've only got $100, doesn't make sense. You should buy another $100 of Bitcoin at that level. So even if you get down to $50, there's many people that would just, it makes more sense to buy $50 more Bitcoin from a value proposition. Then there's going to be people excluded because it's too technically complex for them, for whatever reason. And we're doing a lot to make that simpler, and the more done there, the better. And then some will be excluded because they're just through years of education, and we're working to correct that, but they're just afraid to self-custody, being taught not to be comfortable self-custody. So these will be to different extents corrected, but for a long period of time, you're going to have the majority of people not being able to self-custody. And that means that the only alternative would be for people to use regulated exchanges, which is not a good end state with billions of users. And regulated exchanges are highly centralizing. Liquidity begets liquidity. So you'll end up with this future with a dozen or so exchanges where most people are custodying, and then maybe 100 million people who are self-custodying. That's not a good end state. So if we have to scale, we have to scale in a way where we have something that can compete and be better than an exchange. And so that at that point, I determined that I would look at solutions for getting people off exchanges. And that was the big clarion call. And anyone who's working on this anywhere in the world, I am very focused at helping them as well. But when you think about the end state, not we're at A and we're trying to get to Z. Z is hyper-Bitcoinization. You have to sort of look at what does the world look like with billions of users using Bitcoin. Right now, most people buy Bitcoin. Then the second set of people receive it from friends, family, remittance, and so on. Much smaller. And then the smallest right now earn. But logically, at global scale, it will be the other way around. Most people will earn Bitcoin, just like most people are earning their US dollars or fiat. The vast majority will earn their Bitcoin. They won't buy it from an exchange. Then the second largest majority would receive it from their parents for their school fees or whatever, they would receive it, and then it'll be much smaller, and then the smallest will actually buy. It'll be the equivalent of going to a bureau de change. How often do you do that versus how often do you receive salary? Okay, so when you're earning Bitcoin, then you're going to be you want to receive it in a way where it doesn't cost you much, and it's going to be fast. And so for most people, they will receive money on the Lightning Network, will spend money on the Lightning Network. They will very rarely interact with the base chain. That will be the reality at 8 billion users. Okay, now, so once you realize that, you should architect a system that works for that. And one solution to that is the Fedimint proposal. But any other solutions that are out there that fit that global scale, again, we should be looking for and we should be looking to implement.
Okay, so I think, speaking of regulation, that's exactly the reason why I'm going into countries where there is no regulation yet and where people are using Bitcoin peer-to-peer. So it's also most, like in Zimbabwe, you don't have an official exchange because it's banned. So people are using Bitcoin in their small WhatsApp groups or something and exchange peer-to-peer. And I want that to grow to millions and billions of people, because then we can create facts and say, hey, look, European regulator, there are billions of people using it non-KYC in Africa. Let's do that here too. And speaking of which rails I'm explaining or sharing my knowledge about at the moment, I take what is there and what is easy usable, and mostly that's Lightning and Bitcoin. So it depends on the audience. There are some experienced Bitcoiners, there are completely noobs, and so I always share the knowledge that is fitting for them or what they want to know and use. But in the future, I guess Fedi will be one of the solutions that I will propose then, of course, too, because so many people there don't have the possibility to securely store their keys. And this way of having a community-based money, I mean, Bitcoin for me is money for the people, but it's also community money, because in these regions you often have very high community-driven sense of doing, you're responsible for your community. And so I think this fits very well into the culture there and will be a great step. I'm very excited about it for the future adoption of Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely. I think we should start at first maybe using wallets that are not self-custodial, but are appropriate for receiving Lightning payments, because new users are still they don't have the proper knowledge to know how to save their keys and all this stuff. So maybe we should start using custodial wallets, like a wallet of Satoshi or the kind. That's so easy to install and to use. That's why I recommend when I explain in Bitcoin to the absolute noob, I also use Moon Wallet. That it's a great wallet developed in Argentina, by the way. And that I think that's the way to introduce people directly to the Lightning networks without explaining what it is. You just grab your phone, install this application, and receive sats, and then you can send it easily. So once people are familiar with that dynamic, everything is easier to explain. So I think that's the first thing that we as educators must do for people to understand easily what we're talking about. Because if we want to explain what self-custodial is, the base layer of Bitcoin and all the technical stuff, people just don't get interested. They disperse and they go out. So practical tools, I think it's the best way to introduce the absolute noob into Bitcoin.
Sorry, probably only got a couple of minutes left, not even. Yeah, I think the end goal should be being a sovereign individual. I mean, freedom is the end goal here, but definitely self-custodying is what we should get to. But on the way there, look, I think everyone's covered it over here. You know, using liquidity, using Lightning, using wallets that are able to USDT as well in the wallet. So it's just important to get people on some device working Bitcoin some way or another, but with the ultimate goal of educating how to self-custody. I mean, that's all I'm going to add at the end.
I actually had one last question, but I don't have time to ask it. It was about nation-state adoption versus grassroots adoption, and that has to do with Gen 3, because I feel like I did not make use of Prince Philip's field of knowledge. But I guess I can, so shameless plug, I guess I can do a podcast with all 4 of them. It's gonna be 2 hours.
For sure.
And now you can go to coffee break.
Yeah, we'd love to be that.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Let's
Thank
do
you
this
very
together.
much.
Thank you all.